Yep, sorry, it's been 3.5 years since I put one of these together, but it's a good one. Of all the cool shit, this is probably the greatest thing I've ever done. I was turning 40 in August last year and wanted to do something epic for it, so I decided to do a Euro road trip, 11 countries in 18 days. My dad said he would come too, and my friend Kerry would fly in and meet us for the Italian leg of the trip. After the difficulty of the first two videos, trying to remember everything after the fact, I kept a daily diary this time to post on Instagram and to use for this video when I get round to making it. The 5D NC 500 video was 30 minutes long, so 2.5 weeks would be... I don't know. I'll try and keep this as succinct as possible. I also did a trip round Gran Canaria on the bike in February 2022, recorded it all, wrote the script on the flight home, and I couldn't find the file anywhere. I finally found it a few weeks ago, so I'll do that one too, at some point. Okay, so what's changed in the last 3 years? Well, when I passed my test, my first bike was a 1992 CBR 600 F2, and 3 months into riding, I high-sided it coming back from a run. To this day, the ligament still sticks out my right shoulder from when I landed on my head, but all I ever thought about was the damage I'd done to the bike. When I first seen the ad for it, I couldn't believe how cool it was. It looked just like any old CBR 600 to most. I don't know what it was or why, but it seemed like the perfect bike. Within reason I could have had any bike, but I wanted this one. There's obviously much newer, better, faster bikes. More reliable, sophisticated electronics, much better brakes, it's carb, not fuel injected, and so on. It was 25 years old with low miles, it had been incredibly well looked after by all of its previous owners, and I couldn't be trusted with it for 3 months. I was gutted beyond belief. Underneath was fine, but the fairings were obliterated, and being so old there was no chance of finding like-for-like replacements. It was never going to be the bike that I fell in love with. Given they're so old, most have been crashed, rusted or whatever else, and the chance of finding one in good condition, in the same style... Anyway, after 5 years later, this one came up on my Facebook marketplace suggested. It was way down in South Wales for what would have been unfortunately around a 16-hour round trip with no stops. But I did a deal with the owner anyway and arranged a courier to bring it up. Like my first one, it's absolutely mint and low miles. It's nowhere near as flash as the Ducati. It doesn't have massive Brembos or ABS or rider modes or a digital display or automatic lights or bike meet kudos. The forks are the wrong way round, it's got skinny tyres, it's heavier and slower, and I need to put the choke on every time it starts to stop it cutting out. But I got my perfect bike back. Oh, and the old man got rid of his Harley V-Rod and bought my Monster, so it's still here. That's enough self-indulgence, back to the trip. Organising it was quite the undertaking. We had to look at ferries, all accommodation for each night, and hope that there was no breakdowns or accidents on the way, as that would wreck the whole sequence of stays and be almost impossible to catch up. We had to look at the ULEZ type zones each country had for each city, organise bike and personal insurance, luggage, best way to spend money, prepping the bikes, blah blah blah. I decided to film it with my Insta360 so that I didn't have a helmet mounted camera and could export in different orientations. We missed stuff as well, like we had to get Kerry to go to Halfords and bring us UK stickers for the bikes because we were riding around mainland Europe without those until day 7. I won't bore you with all the organisation because I have no idea if it's interesting and this video is already too long, but this was the route. Glasgow to Newcastle, ferry to Amsterdam, the Netherlands, Belgium going to Spa, Luxembourg, Germany for the Ring and the Black Forest, Switzerland, Liechtenstein, Austria, Italy for 10 days visiting Venice, Bologna, Maranello, Florence, Pisa, Monterosso and Cinque Terre, Lake Como and Monza for the F1. Then Switzerland again, France, Belgium and back to the Netherlands for home. It's also worth mentioning that I took this particular waterproof bag, which was an absolute bargain. If you're thinking of doing similar and have any questions, stick them in the comments. Okay, day 1, Glasgow to Newcastle, ferry to Amsterdam. We started off in wet weather gear because it was full on raining when we left. Scotland was miserable and windy most of the way. We filled up twice and stopped properly for lunch at McD's near the border. England was much drier and it was sunny arriving in Newcastle. The ferry was impressive and massive. We were in room 7045. They had a bar with live music, a nightclub with karaoke, a cinema. We just had the buffet, which was excellent to be fair, and we were in bed for 8 PM. The sleep was dreadful. It was absolutely boiling in the room, but we were full of adrenaline and the breakfast was decent. The old man said he didn't like the movement of the boat. I said when you're lying down it's supposed to be nice because it's like being back in the womb. He said, "We are in the womb, womb number 7045. Day 2, Netherlands, Belgium, Luxembourg and Germany. This day started off really stressful. I've wanted to do a lap of the Nurburgring all my adult life, and we had to get from the Ferry to Spa racetrack in Belgium to Luxembourg, then over to the ring. The route was 5.5 hours riding alone to get there, about 300 miles. It was already going to be tight because the track only opens from 5 PM to 7:30 PM on weekdays, and then the ferry kept us waiting at the dock for over an hour before letting us off. On the way to Spa, I got a wee bit greedy with stretching the fuel in the tank and it cut out, so I nursed it to the hard shoulder where the reserve eventually kicked in. We went and seen Spa but couldn't get in because they were preparing for the 4 hours this weekend, but got to see it from the outside, ironically in front of the welcome fans sign. We jumped down to Luxembourg to fit it into the trip, shared a meal deal chicken wrap, which was the only thing since breakfast that we had, and blasted out to the ring. We got there after 6, took the luggage off and I went to jump straight on. The medical dude at the barrier slapped my knee and wagged his finger. Just jeans? No. I always take the armour out when I get new jeans, but that's an argument for another day. Sure enough, every other rider was wearing a full suit, but I wasn't coming all this way not to get on. So at the side of the track I asked my dad if he had his armour, and they let me take his knee and hip armour out of his jeans and put them in mine. Anyway, did a lap before the session got stopped because a guy put his GT3 into the barrier, and it was honestly unbelievable. It's so easy just to say that after the fact, but honestly it was biblical. I'm gutted for those who haven't done it yet because they've literally just banned bikes from the tourist days. You need to go quick when you're on there because the closing speeds of the stuff coming up behind you on some of the more blind corners doesn't even bear thinking about, and I have to admit, having to ride at 810s when you know you can't afford to crash for the sake of the whole trip was mental, but fun. I got the luggage back on and we stayed in a hotel on the track with a track view room. I highly recommend it because although it looks cool, there's something indescribable about having people going around the GP track right there. Really special. We had dinner, a German dish called Jägerspitzel, then a frozen Jäger shot in the hotel bar. You have to drink it using a racing Michael Jackson style glove so that you're allowed to race after taking it, apparently. Day 3, Nurburgring to the Black Forest. From the all-time high of being on the ring to waking up the next morning to the bike having shit itself of fuel. Took as much of the fairings off as I could, and the carbs were dripping in fuel, and still gradually dripping from the bottom of them. We managed to nurse the bike to rent for ring as it literally cut out going downhill. Got the tank off to inspect more. The owner very kindly gave me some fuel and pointed us to a Honda dealer, Zweirad Schmitz. The mechanic was really knowledgeable and talked us through possible reasons why it happened, yet why it was dry now. We finally set off for the Black Forest B500, one of the most famous roads in the world, also famous for Black Forest Gatto. It took 3 hours to get there, all motorway. We stopped after 50 miles and opened the bike up. The carbs were dry, result. Then stopped after 100 miles, carbs still dry, result. We stopped in Baden-Baden after another 50 miles. The carbs were kinda shimmering with fuel but not dripping. Then it was time to go through the Black Forest, which was incredible. Incredible scenery, incredible towns, incredible twisties, incredible surface, and I got plenty of footage on the 360 camera. We arrived at the most beautiful hotel in Getache. We had the beef carpaccio, a few beers, and had an early night. I got up early to check on the bike. It leaked again, but not as bad as the day before. It stopped dripping about an hour before we set off, but that meant it had been dripping for 12 hours straight. By this point I'd got in contact with the bike mechanic at home, spoke to the ring rental place, and the Honda dealer mechanic, and although they were all hugely knowledgeable, I couldn't tell why it was leaking, and didn't have time to strip the bike to bits. A bit stressful, but I said to myself, if that's the only mechanical complication we both have while on this trip, I'll be delighted. The following morning we had breakfast in the beautiful surroundings and set out to complete the rest of the Black Forest, then heading through Switzerland to Liechtenstein and finishing in Austria for the night. Day 4, Black Forest, Switzerland, Liechtenstein and Austria. Setting off in the morning we had about an hour and a half of the Black Forest to finish, which then led into Switzerland. The Black Forest continued to be amazing. I can't believe how long the B500 is end to end. It feels like an endless road of great surfaces and incredible views. A mix of forest, mountain views and cute towns. After all that stunning scenery, we then hit traffic around Zurich, which was brutal. Mega hot and nose to tail in places. After an hour or so we got treated to the Swiss Alps and the surrounding lakes. Amazing after being stuck in the pish for ages. Not to mention the tunnels giving you a break from the sun and getting a blast of cold air. It's amazing how long they are, miles and miles of tunnels as you ride directly through a giant mountain. Then we got to Liechtenstein, which continued the views. We only stopped for fuel, a drink and a pic with the flag. Then into Austria. Austria was also beautiful, with it getting weird how all these jaw-dropping mountains were becoming the norm after 5 hours riding. There was a particular point where we snaked up a mountain and stopped near the top for a picture. If you can come and do a trip like this and see it for yourself, it's impossible to be disappointed. Absolutely unreal. This day took us about 9.5 hours door to door, so we were shattered again. We were staying at another completely different hotel. The staff were under a bit of pressure as they were dealing with a massive wedding reception. We hadn't booked food, but they said they would whip up a dinner as long as we had Wiener Schnitzel followed by Viennese apple strudel. How could you say no to that? Both were absolutely off the scale. That combined with a couple of pints and we were completely dead after the long day. Oh, and I asked the manager for a dish to put under the bike overnight and they gave me these handy plastic buckets that fit underneath the fairing. After 3 hours of being turned off, it hadn't started dripping fuel yet, but once it does, it would do it for the rest of the night. I didn't understand it at all. Day 5, Austria to Italy. We set off from the hotel in Austria with another puddle under the bike, maybe 300ml had dropped in total. Austria remains stunning. Then after an hour we crossed the Italian border. Still stunning, over a motorway of endless bridges. Then we hit the twisties before the Dolomites. I thought the Black Forest was good, but I enjoyed this even more. It was a bit more technical. After some more twisties, the world opened up and we got our first sight of the Dolomites, which was hours of up and down mountain passes, looking at views that resembled paintings. The way you look into the distance and it doesn't even look real. Random stops had turquoise waters under snow-capped mountains and 30-degree heat. Motorcycle riding nirvana. At the halfway point of the trip, we stopped properly for lunch at a town unbelievably called Alba. There we had our first Italian pizza and espresso, taking in the view. We pressed on to Venice, where Kerry had flown in just half an hour before. 3 of us were set to do the Italian leg of this trip, and she was waiting for us at the B&B. As we got to the B&B, I was conscious the bike would be dropping its arse in a few hours, so I literally went around the doors of hotels, kebab shops, restaurants and so on, explaining I needed a tray, what for, and that I was happy to pay. Finally, this lady in an Italian restaurant who spoke no English, Google Translate was a godsend, produced these plastic trays. The restaurant refused to take money for them, so I booked the 3 of us in there for dinner. We all got pizza, again, tiramisu, torta della nonna, along with a few scoops, including grappa. We were now off the bikes entirely to explore Venice on the last day of my 30s. I never enjoyed a shave and a decompression more in my life. Riding wise, the first 5 days of this trip was one short day followed by 4 very long days. There's 13 more days of this trip still to go, and only 7 are actually in the saddle, and only one of those is a long day thankfully, so the tough stints are mostly behind us. Day 6, Venice. This was the first day off the bike. We had a coffee and a pastry in a cafe after a great sleep, then caught the ferry from our digs onto mainland Venice over to the historic island that makes Venice famous. Kerry'd arranged lunch at the most amazing hotel, the Gritty Palace. The place had a nicer bathroom than my whole house. I had the carpaccio again after a bruschetta start, and the views from the seat speak for themselves. In the morning we encouraged the old man to get a hat to make him look more Italian, then made him pose when we got to Venice. The man from De Monte, he say yes. The whole trip to the island was incredible, and we finished it off with a pistachio gelato. The guy asked if we wanted the mini cannolis wrapped up. According to him, I invented putting it in the gelato like a flake. Culinary genius. When we got back, I checked on the bike. I had been sitting for about 24 hours and this video is all that dripped out. I could then take these plastic trays with me to every overnight stop. The rest of the night was me mentally preparing to turn 40. Did I mention that was happening? Day 7, Venice to Florence. The plan for my 40th was to have breakfast in Venice, lunch in Bologna and dinner in Florence. We had a lovely coffee and pastry start in Venice before checking out, but I went to start the bike and it was empty. This got a bit sketchy because after brainstorming what to do, I took my dad's Monster to a petrol station, blagged an empty container from the valeters, put 5 litres of petrol in it and balanced it between me and the tank back to the gaff. Riding around an airport area with a giant container of fuel on my lap wasn't the way I'd planned to do 40. So we got the fuel on my bike, then headed to the Ducati factory just outside Bologna. We did the tour, seen Foggy's 1994 legend right up to Pecco's recent winning bike, then we went to Maranello to see Ferrari. Kerry said there was a storm where she was in Bologna, so me and the old man had lunch in Maranello instead, put the wet weather gear on, skipped Bologna and headed straight to Florence. We parked the bikes in a local multi-storey car park that you can use overnight, checked into the coolest millionaire-style city pad apartment and got ourselves ready for the evening. We managed to get our clothes washed in here, which was hugely welcome after a week. We were off the bikes for the whole of the next day again. Not doing 5-day stints on the bike was really welcome. Kerry'd organised drinks in an incredible rooftop bar, then we had the best dinner in another. Birthday dinner was beef tartare followed by raviolo nero. Walking between those two restaurants as we approached the Duomo, a busker was unbelievably playing Careless Whisper, which was number 1 when I was born, which was pretty cool. 40 had started decent. Day 8, Florence. The bikes were parked up so we didn't have to look at them. We booked to see Michelangelo's David in the morning, which was spectacular. I was absolutely stunned by it. I'd always assumed it was life-size, but it's 17 foot tall. Unbelievable. We met up with the old man for a coffee and did some sightseeing, then we had lunch at the oldest restaurant in Florence, Antico Ristorante Paoli, 1827. Everything was delicious all round, including the best Aperol of the trip. More sightseeing and a late dinner. They moved some tables around for us and fitted us in proper Italian style, amazing again, and they took the picture that really encapsulated the Italian leg of this trip. Day 9, Florence to Cinque Terre. We went round early in the morning, around 7:30am, to check on the bikes. The car park attendants had thrown a load of sand down, even though I had the trays to protect it from the drips, and they put a warning sign saying my bike was getting towed at 8am if I didn't move it. I couldn't believe the luck we had deciding to check on them early. I tried to start it and it was empty again. I had to run up the steep exit ramp with it Benny Hill style, put it into the street, then do a 40-minute round trip to get a jerry can and fuel. Walking through Florence with a jerry can of fuel was almost as bad as driving around an airport with a bike bomb the day before. We filled the bike up and headed to Pisa, where we had a really poor lunch there next to the tower. Avoid all the tourist things around there if you can. We planned to go to Barga, which is a sort of Scottish town in the north of Italy, but it was a bit out of the way and the old man badly needed a rear tyre. Phoning and messaging garages, nobody had the monster's strange tyre size. Then I had the idea of, instead of looking for mechanics, check for Ducati dealers. There was literally one halfway from Pisa to the next overnight. I phoned at 12:30pm and they were so helpful. I had the Pirellis in the right size and in stock. They said, be here by 3pm and we'll fit them in an hour. We did, and they did. Unbelievable. Glad someone was having good fortune with their bike. We pressed on to our stay in Monterosso. From the city of Florence earlier in the day to the sea and beaches of Cinque Terre in the afternoon, it was exactly the sort of place you would think when you think of Italy. Stunning. We checked in, went for a walk around and had dinner, where we were looking forward to the next day because we were off the bikes again. Day 10, Monterosso and Cinque Terre. Although it was a day off the bikes, I still got up early to get a train to the neighbouring town, buy a jerry can and fill it with fuel in case the bike had nothing left in it the next day. Kerry came with me, so we got coffee and cream croissants. Bought a beach bag for the jerry can because the folk look at you like you're mental carrying it down the street. The rest of the day was just rest and eating. Monterosso is stunning and warm, the food is off the scale. We had a lunch with a view, then dinner in a sort of outside alley type restaurant looking on the water. The next day we were heading off to Como, then more rest and Formula 1. Day 11, Monterosso to Varenna in Como. We filled my bike, then strapped the jerry can down along with everything else. We also got a fuel hose to siphon the petrol out of the tank at our home for the next 3 nights, so that A, it didn't all piss out, and B, we could put it back in a few days. The long ride was pretty uninspiring, just 4 hours of motorway past Milan and the San Siro, stopping for roadside Italian sandwiches. I kept an eye open on Ticketmaster while riding for hours for the Oasis tickets that dropped. I got to number 1 in the queue after starting 73,000, and it said it sensed my connection was sketchy, so it kicked me out. Once we hit Como, everything became gorgeous. We rode the coast up to Varenna. Our place was something like 14 hairpins all the way up the hill from the town centre. It's worth it for when you walk into the bedroom and you're treated with that balcony. My god. We siphoned the fuel out and left the bikes parked for a few days. There was a local bar that served pizza next to us, thankfully, so we didn't have to walk all the way down the hill to the town. It was important to get a good sleep because there would be some amount of walking the next day. Day 12, Monza. Ferrari have won once at Monza since 2010, that's how rare it is. We got a takeaway coffee for the train from Varenna to Monza, then a shuttle bus. We got to the track about 11:30 and could hear the classic F1 parades while walking up. We really missed those V10s and even the V8s so badly. We went on the inside of Seconda Variante and stayed there for the whole race, taking turns with a German couple to be at the front. We also bought brollies because it was so hot. The Tifosi were going tonto the more and more it looked like Leclerc was going to hold on. It was actually quite emotional when Ferrari done it, everyone cheering, running and hugging each other. As usual for Monza, they let you on the track afterwards and we headed to the trophy ceremony. Genuine goosebumps walking down the track that's literally just been raced on, with the scenes, the atmosphere and picking up marbles as mementos. I've attended quite a few F1 races, but that whole after race experience is a core memory. It took ages to get home and we went straight to a restaurant in Varenna our landlord recommended called Cavallino. It was a bit fancy and we turned up covered in dust and clothes that could have walked themselves into the washing machine. After dinner we headed back to the apartment and had a much needed shower. What a day. Day 13, Varenna and Bellagio. We started the day off with coffee and pistachio cake on the balcony, then decided to get the ferry to Bellagio, as in the real one. The weather was kinda cloudy in the morning and had wee pockets of rain, which was actually a relief from the day before and pleased to get it out of the way because we were riding the next day. We did a bit of tourism, then walked along the promenade, had a nice lunch, then jumped the ferry back to Varenna for more coffee, affogato, spritz and walk on our hometown promenade. This whole area of Italy is just beautiful. If you get the chance to come here, soak in the sights, the culture and the atmosphere and eat the best food you'll ever eat, you have to do it. After a cracking indulgent day we went back up the road to chill and prepare the bike for the next day, then stayed up the hill at the local bistro for dinner. Oh, and some fireworks woke me up at 11 PM. Kerry was off to Milan the next day and me and the old man were off to Switzerland, beginning the journey back towards the ferry. Day 14, Varenna to Switzerland. We started the day with a coffee on the terrace, one last chance to look at it, then a coffee in the train station to say cheerio to Kerry as she heads to Milan for a few days. We headed around the north of Como, past Lake Lugano and up to Switzerland through the Gotthardstrasse. The only pass we were going to make on the trip was the Gotthard Pass, but Google Maps done that thing where it says alternate/quicker route or whatever and you have to click no. But we're on a bike, you sometimes miss it, and I was fuming that it took us more motorway than intended. I thought it was fine because there was one more cut off before it, but then roadworks, no access to it, bastard. We got to our lovely hotel where they let us put our bikes in their garage, then had a pork cordon bleu that put me in bed before 8 PM, not before stopping for a while to take in the views. They washed and even pressed our clothes, so having that reset for the final 4 days was really welcome. The next day we'd be heading through to Switzerland and on to France. Day 15, Switzerland to France. We'd been so lucky with the weather so far. It was wet leaving Scotland 2 weeks ago, and we got the tiniest drizzle for less than 10 minutes heading to Florence the week before, but that had been it. Then we woke up in Switzerland with outside soaked. We got the wet weather gear on to head to France, and it turns out we only needed them for an hour, plus the rain was really light. Oh, also we left the windows wide open in Switzerland, and I woke up at 4 AM hearing a fluttering at the other side of the room. I thought it was a bat or a bird that got in. It was a moth. I did not know they could get moths so big the wings sound like a bird's. I managed to catch it, but the thing filled an entirety of a tumbler. Anyway, filled it back up and siphoned petrol, as was the way now, and set off with the plastic trays and jerry can at the top of my travel bag. We made our way from Switzerland into France and found a hotel that would give us lunch at 2 PM. Most places shut at 1:30 for some reason. They said we could have lunch if we took the set menu, so we ended up with a 3-course lunch by accident. We cracked on to Nancy, our spa hotel, Me and the old man were straight in, although we had to buy these very specific tight swim trunks, even though I had swim shorts as those weren't allowed. It was like one of those old school Roman style baths with the pillars and the cornices. Unbelievable. We had a swim, a sauna, then lay down in the sun loungers and ended up chatting for over an hour, completely gubbed. It was exactly what we needed. We then had dinner in this beautiful local bistro called Le Local. The staff and the locals were absolutely brilliant. Once the rain came on and everyone from outside came inside, we were chatting to everyone. It was so wholesome. A French guy walked in with a kilt on and everyone had a good laugh about it, including him. We had escargot followed by beef and duck dishes, and I was feeding this beautiful dog under the table. What a place. Then we went back to the hotel and it was good to be back in a room with aircon. We were both out like a light. Day 16, France. I got up this morning with what looked like a bite on my arm that was swollen. I never thought much about it. Went to the chemist and they gave me cream. This is where I discovered the old man speaks decent French. Who knew? We had a light hotel breakfast, a coffee and a pastry, then headed to the iconic Rime Jeu. We started the day in normal gear, but had a change to the wet weather gear after an hour or so, and it got pretty wet. The first half of the day was miserable, which is the first time I could say that about any time on the trip. We got to Rime Jeu while it was still pretty wet, but managed to soak it in, take some pics, including chatting to an English GT4 owner and his wife, and got a vid of an Aventador doing pulls back and forward. Obviously we've been eating the absolute best for the last few weeks, totally spoiled, but we actually grabbed a McD's for lunch because it seemed everywhere in the north of France was shut. It was brilliant. After McD's the clouds cleared, so we took the wet weather gear off and was so glad the way it turned out. About a month ago I'd asked a Facebook group about a section of the trip from Rime Jeu to the hotel, and instead of taking the motorway we went along some of the coolest roads through farmland and little French towns. The weather picked up and that 2-hour trip totally changed the day. We got to the last hotel of the trip. It was pretty 1980s basic, but we booked in for dinner. The restaurant was a completely different kettle of fish. It was cracking and the food was unbelievable. We had the crevette and garlic butter with gratin dauphinois and creme brulee to finish. An epic last meal. It was time for an early bed and all that was left was a 3-hour ride to the ferry home the next day. The start of the ride would be the last 5 minutes of road at the very top of France, given we were right at the border, through Belgium and on to Amsterdam. Day 17, France to Ferry. The less said about the start of this day the better. It was thrown it down as we left the north of France, and the motorway through Belgium for the first few hours was a total shift. I'm a confident rider, but it did feel pretty dangerous. The only major rain we had the whole time, so happily took it on the day that we only had to get to the boat. It got brighter as we reached the Netherlands, and then Amsterdam was full on scorching. We made it in plenty of time, we got on the boat early, even set up the trays etc for any drips that the bike might make. I deliberately ran the bike into the reserve so there wasn't much in it. Even if it ended up empty and needed to be pushed off at the other side and then take some fuel out of the old man's bike, that would have been ideal. All I could think about was getting to the UK without inconveniencing the boat staff. The ferry was great again, sleep and heat were an issue in the room, but apart from that the food was great and it was a good way to relax after a busy day. Before bed we went up to the top deck where they played some great music and had a bar while watching the sunset. Day 18, ferry to home. We got the bikes off the boat, fueled up and headed home. Newcastle was dark and damp, but just as we were getting to the border it hit 22 degrees and the sun split the trees. It was an amazing run home. And that was it, we done it. 11 countries, 2,900 miles in total, Scotland, England, Netherlands, Belgium, Luxembourg, Germany, Liechtenstein, Austria, 10 days in the north of Italy, Switzerland, France, then the journey home. We got back, put the bikes away and I sat on the couch with a coffee, looking out over a lovely day. What a way to do 40. It's the same with anything in life that someone's always done more than you. There will be those that look at the 3,000 miles that we did, roll their eyes and think it was nothing compared to the trips they do. But honestly I don't mind admitting it's up there with some of the greatest things I've ever had the privilege to do, and to do it with the people I did it with. We got really lucky with a lot of things like the weather, the Ferrari win, the Careless Whisper playing on my birthday, but we probably deserved some luck. The hours and hours of planning and prep, the need for things to go right, adjusting to make things work, praying for good weather, the longer stints on the bike, constantly checking the sat-nav, tying in with Kerry's trains and the Italian leg, seeing everything we wanted to see, finding places to eat, checking fuel levels, having hundreds of conversations where you don't speak the native tongue like a Luddite, hours of constant awareness on the bike because you can die at any moment, making sure you document it, not for Instagram or this video, but to make sure you remember it all, because there was so much to take in, and because it was so intense, the 18 days were over in a flash, and it might be the greatest thing you ever do. I hope you enjoyed this. I hope it was helpful or entertaining. It's a lot to put together in the middle of a busy life, but it was so important to do. At least I've got 9 years or so to worry about what my 50th looks like. Jesus Christ. Until the next one, here's my favourite pick again.